Hi, this is Lars Vanlund from Capture Sweden and the third chapter of our Capture video tutorial. In this chapter, I'd like to talk to you about one of the core concepts of Capture, the navigator. The navigator comprises of two parts: the green one at the bottom right corner of each view and the red one that becomes visible when you select an object. Let's start with the green one. It consists of an illustration showing what kind of view we're in, as well as which axis we're seeing and how they're oriented. We've also got three buttons. Clicking and dragging the first button allows us to panorate the view. Clicking and dragging the second button allows us to zoom in and out of the view. And finally, the third button reveals a menu with options for the view. Note that when working with the panoration and zoom buttons in a three-dimensional view, there are alternate behaviors available if combined with the Shift and Control keys on the keyboard. Let's change focus to the red part of the navigator now. There are a couple of different ways of selecting objects, but the most obvious one is to simply click on an object, and that's how we'll start for now. Once we've done that, you can see the red part of the navigator appearing, with a rectangular selection region, a rotation triangle, and a set of 4 buttons. Starting with the buttons, the first one will always deselect all selected objects. The second button reveals a menu with all operations available on the current selection. The third button is used for drag and drop operations, such as patching. And finally, we have the fourth button, which reveals a quick summary with information about our current selection. Moving on, the selection rectangle is used to move objects. Simply click and drag anywhere in the red region to move the selected objects. Click and drag at the base of the rotation triangle to position it, and then click and drag at the edge of the rotation triangle to rotate the selected objects. Again, there are alternate behaviors available if combined with the Shift and Control keys on the keyboard. Right, so I've shown you the basics now, but I want to take it one step further and show a couple of other functions as well. One of the most important functions in Capture is the clone tool. It's available from the navigator's operations button and shows you a dialog with options. I'm going to make a simple example where I create 2 clones of my box at a distance of 3 meters. You can see that the selection has now been expanded to include the 2 clones created, and if you look carefully you can see that the corners of the selection rectangle look slightly different as well. That's because they are now hotspots for activating the distribution function. Click and drag in one of these corners to distribute the selected objects. Note that this does not resize the object, it merely repositions them. Earlier back I mentioned different ways of selecting objects, so let's take a look at some of the options available. We've already tried clicking on objects, but that only lets us select one object at a time. However, if you combine with the Shift key on the keyboard, you will always be adding objects to the selection, and if you combine it with the Control key instead, you can toggle objects. Another common way of selecting objects is by dragging a selection rectangle around them. Note that there's a subtle difference between dragging from the left to the right and from the right to the left. When dragging from left to right, all objects need to be inside the rectangle, whereas if you drag from the right to the left, it's enough to just touch it. Finally, I'd like to show you the difference between the hollow and solid parts of the edge of the rotation triangle. If you use the solid part, you will rotate the selection as a whole, whereas if you use the hollow part, you rotate the objects individually. So that's all I wanted to show you today. Thank you for your time, and I hope you'll enjoy working with Capture.